So I've got all my notes in front of me, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of an introduction to what we're going to be talking about today without even reading. I don't know who here is familiar at all with the Florida GEMS project, which focuses on saw palmetto and natural saw palmetto sourcing. And the issue, of course, of adulteration in botanicals is a critical one within our industry. And saw palmetto really serves as a lightning rod for some of the challenges that we're managing in the supply chain where it comes to natural supply chain challenges. There have been, for this particular crop now, which really pretty much in the United States only grows within Florida, there have been some challenges to the supply chain due to weather issues, not specifically or necessarily climatic, but some critical weather events that have happened in Florida recently, which most people are aware of, are affecting saw palmetto crop. But one of the issues that emerges with these challenges is opportunity, perhaps, for some misidentified synthesized products. And what we really want to be focusing on here is not simply the benefits of using the natural product and the naturally sourced product, but full transparency, translucency in the supply chain, and what that really means. So we've got a great panel for you today to talk about all of these issues, not only from the regulatory standpoint, but also from the sourcing and the health benefits standpoint in the Florida GEMS program. So I'm just going to introduce who our speakers are, and then we'll move through the panel, and then we'll do a little bit of Q&A at the end of the session. So our first speaker is the CEO of Valensa. That's Uma Sadin, right here. And just before he gets going speaking, I'm just going to give you again a little rundown. I think most people here probably know Mark Blumenthal, founder of American Botanical Council. Thank you, and Dr. Ken Redcross, who is an MD, not just a doctor but a medical doctor. And Steve Rosenman, who's VP Marketing at IVC Corporation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Uma.
Good evening. Can you hear me? It's good. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome all of you on behalf of the panel members here. Thank you for joining us. I also thank you on part of the Valensa team. Let me give you a quick introduction about who we are, what we do. That's a panel. So Valensa International was found in 1999. The company was founded on saw palmetto extraction. So that's the DNA of the company. That's the genesis of the company. It started as a supercritical CO2 extraction company for saw palmetto, which is a native crop of Florida. And at that time, all the saw palmetto berries were being harvested and shipped to Europe, but still in some countries in Europe it's a drug for treating benign prostatic hyperplasia and LUTs. Valensa decided to invest in supercritical CO2 technology for extracting saw palmetto for application dietary supplement in the US and rest of the world. So our company is based on predominantly two different technology platforms. One is microalgae technology, which is pioneered by our sister company, Patty Nutraceuticals. Valensa has got supercritical CO2 technology. So all our branded ingredients and branded formulations are derived from these technology platforms that goes into indication-specific applications like joint health, eye health, immune, prostate. So let's talk about prostate today. Now, at Valensa we say that death and taxes are inevitable, but we say death, taxes, and BPH is inevitable. You're going to get it at some point of time. So if you're a man, you're going to have death, taxes, and BPH. If you're a lady, you're going to have men walking around with BPH and death and taxes. So in either way, BPH is inevitable. It's just a matter of time that a man is going to have that based on genetic disposition. So a big commitment is to the GEMS program that we rolled out last year. It's been in a process of rollout, is to how do we create a sustainable saw palmetto crop which is high in quality and purity at the same time, and make sure that we meet our customers' demand. Because Palmetto historically has been a wild harvested crop. It's been subjected to its vagaries of nature, demand, supply gaps, labor issues. So the GEMS programs will holistically address these issues. So quick Palmetto, I'm sure Mark is going to cover a lot on Palmetto, so I won't spend a lot of time on this. It's a history, it's a product that's a drug in Europe, it's a dietary supplement in the US, a lot of science behind it. There's almost 6,000 tons of dry berries harvested from the state of Florida alone. As I said, Palmetto is endemic to southeast United States. These palms are hundreds of years old. It's difficult to cultivate it. And in a good year, you have about 6,000, 10,000 tons of dry berries being harvested. This year was a poor crop. We could only have half the yield of a usual year. So it was an unusual crop. It doesn't happen every year. It happens once in 10 years. But the objective for Valensa is to make sure that our customer supply chain doesn't even get impacted by these crop cycles. And some of the things we're doing here is to protect our customers. This is the fine looking palms. The berries, when you harvest them, they are wet. They are in a blend of black to orange, and those are ripe. And the ones that are green aren't ripe yet, but when we say green berries, those are very small, don't have oil content, and it's not mature. And this is how this is dried. It's a farm operation. So we have two operations for Palmetto. There's a farm operation, there's an ag operation where we get the berries, harvest them, dry them, and there is a dietary supplement operation where we take it to our site in Central Florida. We extract using supercritical CO2. This is a farm operation. So you can see the dry berries, they put into sacks, and then shipped to Valensa where we extract it. So what you see on the right is the supercritical CO2 technology. It uses no solvents, and we are one of the unique sites in the world that uses ultra high pressure CO2. We can do up to 800 to 1,000 bars, and we can produce up to 100 tons of Palmetto in a good year when there's enough supply of berries. Again, it's a GMP facility. We recently went through the USP audit to get our Palmetto certified under the USP dietary verification program. So this is on the extraction method. Now, there's a wide range of Palmetto products out there. That's one of the reasons why you see different signs on Palmetto, because of product heterogeneity. So they say Palmetto extract, but all Palmetto extracts are not the same. You can extract using a weak solvent. You can just dry the berries, crush them up, and sell it. What we do is a pharmaceutical type product, which is using ultra high pressure CO2, much better than hexane. Hexane is a very powerful solvent. It's used in Europe for making the drug. What we use is a friendly, clean, supercritical CO2, which ensures that it gets all the high molecular weight compounds out to make the product more effective. So this is our excellence program in supply chain. We call this the Florida GEMS. I mean, GEMS GEMS because the berries are so valuable to us and to our farmers. So we want to make sure that whatever we get on a supply chain, it follows these excellence program pillars, which is traceability, sustainability, purity, and responsibility. So when you look at traceability, it's very simple. Palmetto is only found in Florida, some in Georgia, and what we are been working with the Florida Department of Agriculture is to see how we can ensure that the green berries don't get harvested. The harvesting takes the right time. We can go back and actually connect the data on where the harvest was done, who's the landowner, where the harvesting comes from tagging programs. So it's a very extensive program. We just rolled it out. Unfortunately for us, this year has been a bad crop year, but that doesn't take us down. We are moving forward with full confidence that we'll be able to fix the issue of supply chain in looking forward. So this is definitely key for a lot of our customers. but also for the Florida Department of Agriculture. This is also to ensure that it's responsible harvesting of the berries as well. Sustainability is extremely important, and I would say sustainability, the whole category is important. Now, saw palmetto in the US is I would say, is not a strong category because of, again, product heterogeneity. There are products which are completely scam in the marketplace, and there are products which are sold by reputable brands, very good high-end retailers, club chains, who actually make the decision to sell the right product, but they're not able to compete against the Amazon brands, a lot of them selling adulterated, inefficacious products. So sustainability of the whole category is in question, and we as a company that was founded on saw palmetto, we feel it's our responsibility to make sure that it's sustainable. So we're working with the University of Florida. It's a land-grant university. So we're working with them. The landowners trust the University of Florida, because they have a committed agriculture department. So we're working with them to see how can we bring in sustainable crop practices. It's a wild crop, but can we bring in crop management to ensure that there is, consistent yields, and also to make sure that if there is issues with nature, with hurricane or with fungus, the berries prematurely falling off, it can be prevented. So again, the key in sustainability, again, from the market perspective, is that there has to be restriction on harvesting immature berries. Green berries are a big scam. Ladies and gentlemen, it's like you go to a restaurant, you want a baked chicken, and somebody gives you a sunny side up. The chicken hasn't hatched yet. So taking green berries is like it's a scam. It doesn't have the fatty acids. It's just a facade of saying, it's saw palmetto. So we want the restrictions to happen allow the berries to mature, and then companies can harvest it. Now, if somebody wants to sell that as a berry powder, it's their own responsibility. We want to make sure that we have enough oil for our customers and for the rest of the responsible players in the industry as well. Again, I think we spend a lot of time on sustainability. I'd like to go into purity. This is where Valenza steps in, where our extraction method, we work with the USP. There's a USP monograph, which was published in 1908 on saw palmetto. So it's like you have the fatty acid ratios, everything. So you cannot, unless you want to do it, you cannot buy an adulterated or fake saw palmetto. It's a negligence by intent. So because there is published, validated studies to show how can you actually fingerprint and find out what the real saw palmetto is. Again, USP has been one of our partners. So we have a monograph in place, and we'll probably have the first USP verified dietary ingredient as saw palmetto. The audit has been completed. We're just waiting for the certification. Responsibility, again, I think it's more than profits. Along with some of the good players in the industry, there are some good companies as well. We work with industry thought leaders and guardians like APA, American Botanical Council. We are part of the Adopt a Herb program. We are part of the Botanical Adulterants program. I think it's extremely important for us to do this to protect the industry. It's not us, it's not Valenza, but the industry needs credibility. And if you want to build credibility, we all have to do the right thing. It's sometimes tough to do the right thing because sometimes, short-term profits, are chosen over long-term strategy and long-term intent. And I think there has to be a more conscious approach to things. And that's where we love working with companies and regulatory bodies and non-for-profit organizations that actually want us to do the right thing and want the other players to do the right thing to protect the industry. And with this, I pass it on to Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Hi, everybody. Let's hear it for Uma. Great presentation. I want to thank Uma and the good folks from Valenza, proud ABC sponsor members, for inviting me and including me to be part of this program this afternoon. Important herb. How many men in the room take saw palmetto? How many men in the room are too young to take saw palmetto? At any rate, I've been taking saw palmetto for about 30 years, since I was about 40-something, and it's been really working well for me. First, I want to acknowledge Valenza, because you mentioned it. Valenza has adopted saw palmetto on ABC's HerbMed Pro database. HerbMed Pro is a very robust database of 265 herbs, where we compile all the known published available data from the PubMed database into a very organized way for people to be able to search for specific types of literature very quickly. And you can see maybe, if I can get the, where it says clinical trials, 134 clinical trials as of October on our database, which is funded in part by adoption. Pardon me? Click it this way, and will it show? No. No, no. That's just the monitor, sorry. Anyway, so 134 clinical trials published on saw palmetto, accessible in summarized form on our database, going back to 1984. So it's almost like 4 articles that are clinically oriented on saw palmetto published annually. And this shows you on the database how we've taken every one of these reviews of clinical trials and or the clinical trials themselves and reduced them down to one-sentence summaries, distilled them down to one-sentence summaries with a link to their official abstract on the PubMed database. And the reason I'm mentioning this is important because there's a lot of clinical work that's been done on saw palmetto. Here's an example of some of the data on saw palmetto, some selected clinical trials and review articles that basically test the issue of saw palmetto on various prostate parameters, which are measured according to various accepted national and international standards based on questionnaires for men who based on their frequency, urination, of nocturia, the night, how many times they get up to pee at night, the urgency of how much retained urine there is, that kind of thing. And this is a very busy slide. Some of these are very busy, but the point here on this slide is that there's some long-term saw palmetto studies, 6 to 18 months, and then the ones on the bottom are the short-term, which are 1 to 3 months. And what you see are the number of people in these studies, the type, with a few that are withdrawn, the type of extract or the brand name of the specific saw palmetto extract, and that's important too because most of the research, if not all of the research on saw palmetto has been conducted on, the clinical research is based on standardized extracts, not dried powders, not tinctures. They're based on chemically defined, standardized extracts that are made either with ethanol, some with methanol, hexane, or supercritical CO2 extract. That's a very important part of the conversation. Here is more information on saw palmetto based on the type of extracts available. Again, hexane, which is basically a French product called Permixon from Pierre Fabre, one of the large phytomedicine companies. But it shows that on these slides, that it increases the frequency, the volume of urine, and reduces the symptom score on the, in this one, the International Prostate Symptom Score. So the data are very compelling, even though there's plus and minus positive and negative trials on the saw palmetto made with properly manufactured saw palmetto according to various manufacturing techniques where they're standardizing the extract. So it basically increases the peak urinary flow compared to placebo. It lowers the symptom score on the IPSS score and other scores and reduces the frequency of urination at night during sleeping. This slide shows the different types of positive trials, neutral and or negative trials. So the majority of trials published on saw palmetto have come out with positive outcomes based on the various primary objectives of the trial. And you see that here's 111 here in that first bar. These are clinical trials. These are human clinical trials. They're not done on lawyers. They're done on real humans so that they really have reasonable results. However, we've been concerned for many years about the potential adulteration of leading popular herbs in the marketplace, including but not limited to saw palmetto. So in 2011, we started the ABC, AHP, NCNPR Botanical Adulterants Prevention Program with the University of Mississippi, FDA-funded Center for Natural Products Research, and the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia, led by my good friend Roy Upton, which is a nonprofit organization funded by people in the herbal community. We published last year in January or February of 2017 our first bulletin confirming the allegations and suspicions that saw palmetto at that time was being adulterated with different types of vegetable oils, particularly coconut, palm, olive oil, etc., because some of those oils contain some of the same fatty acids that are stipulated as being part of what is important in the free fatty acid content, which is one of the pharmacopoeial standards for saw palmetto. Now here's saw palmetto adulteration from China. The first one is an ethanolic extract. The first two, you can see the dark looking. The third and fourth are the CO2 extract. But look at the fifth and sixth and the seventh and eighth, the lighter colored ones, are actually adulterated material coming out of China that obviously doesn't show just by color that there's a problem here, that this material does not have the same organoleptic, physical, visual attributes of saw palmetto that is made properly by proper manufacturing techniques. Now here's adulteration. The assay on the left deals with the type of ratios between the lauric acid in relation to the other acids that are shown up here. Whoops, let me come back here a second. So there's different acids. This shows you the legitimate saw palmetto, authentic saw palmetto, what the standards or the values should be. Here's what the adulterated sample specifications claim to be, and then upon appropriate analysis, these are showing the out of spec, the out of specification values for various issues here or various measurements of this adulterated saw palmetto. So this is further chemical evidence of adulteration of saw palmetto. But wait, there's more. Not only did we have problems with saw palmetto being adulterated with vegetable oils, we learned this year from some research done by our friends at Indina and published in one of the journals just recently in the last year, and then again this year, and then again last week in Food Chemistry, a deeper dive. They found that saw palmetto named materials coming out of China are being adulterated with animal fats, with fatty acids from animal origin, and this has been documented by isotopic fingerprinting of the fatty acids. Now, a lot of this is a very busy slide, but here's the bottom line on understanding what this slide's about. The ones in the green on the left in the upper left-hand corner are the principal components of authentic saw palmetto. The ones on the right and below here are lamb fat, pig fat, beef fat, and chicken fat. That is, they back the truck up at the rendering plant of the slaughterhouse in China, apparently. They take the fat from the dead animals and they take it over to another plant where they're able to fractionate out the various palmitic acid and or linoleic acid or other types of acids that are part of that fat, and then try to recompose it as saw palmetto, maybe using some legitimate saw palmetto as a base, but clearly containing animal fats. Now, if you're a vegetarian like myself, or if you're a member of various religions that don't allow certain types of meat to be eaten, this is not only unethical, it's morally abhorrent, aside from being illegal. So what we did is we actually came back and republished our saw palmetto botanical adulterants bulletin that we published last year to revise it to show this latest, lowest form of adulteration that one can imagine, probably, using animal fats to mimic the type of fatty acid profiles found in legitimate saw palmetto. And of course, Uma already mentioned this, but the weather situation this last year has affected saw palmetto supplies such that estimates show that there'll be at least 300%, if not higher, price differentials compared to previous years in saw palmetto because the market has been strongly affected adversely by the heavy rains in Florida. And I also want to acknowledge our good friends at Valenza for not only adopting saw palmetto on the HerbMed Pro database, but also becoming one of the inaugural underwriters of our new ABC Sustainable Herbs program a press release which was just announced on Monday. It's our new website that we have. Anybody can access it, a Sustainable Herbs program. And the function of this program, it's already up and running with 14 videos on it. We're looking at different ways that herbs are supplied through the supply chain. Eventually we'll include saw palmetto as well. The idea is, where do our herbs come from? How are they handled through the supply chain? How do we educate companies about sustainability and sustainable practices? And how do we inspire people to become more sustainable in their operations, not just through supply chain management, but also in the way they operate their facilities? And how can you become more sustainable in your home? So once again, I thank you for your time and attention. I thank the good people at Valenza for inviting me to be included here. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice job, big guy.
It's all yours.
All righty. Hello, everyone. So we've heard a little bit about the business side, right, as far as this, and then Mark did a great job of showing a little bit about what saw palmetto was about. Now, the fascinating thing for me is that saw palmetto has been used for hundreds of years by Native American societies, and that's where my last name comes from. Red Cross is Native American. And it was used by the Mayans, the Seminoles, so it's something that's been around for a very long time. Now, the reason why I needed to come here today is because I needed to really let you know, what does this look like in a medical office when I go through every day? Because we hear about saw palmetto, we know about the importance of making sure that they're the correct berries, but what does that mean for all of us? If any of you out there are around 50 years of age, but you guys look all very young, so I don't think we have any 50-year-olds, but if so, it's something that's very important, and we'll share why. So I wanted to have this slide here because this slide is the top 10 health concerns of men who are 50 and older. Now, I want you to look at the list. So the first thing you see is coronary artery disease. Now, that's the #1 cause of death for men and women anyhow, right? But then you come down and you see hypertension, and then you see diabetes. These are the big boys when it comes to healthcare, what we're dealing with in our office. But #4 there, an enlarged prostate. And I wanted it there so you could see exactly how much that really can impact all of us, men, of course, as we get a little bit older. So as we talk about it, so even at age 25, we start to learn that our prostate size, even from there, starts to enlarge a little bit. And the reason why I use that number of 50 years of age, because it's that old adage that by the time you're 50, 50% of us will have an enlarged prostate. For any of you out there who may be 80, unfortunately, I have to tell you that there's an 80% chance that your prostate is going to be enlarged. But don't worry, we're going to talk about some things that we can do about it. So when you want to figure out the cause of BPH, I'd be a very, very rich man if I could tell you everything that comes involved with that. But we do know that there is a mechanism in particular that we try to focus on. And that theory is that DHT, which is in fact a derivative of testosterone, is actually important to causing the prostate to enlarge over time. Now, if you look at these two slides, one of the things you'll see on the left side, which of course is the normal side, look at how beautiful the lining of that bladder looks, and as well as the prostate over there, a nice normal sized prostate. But then we come over here to the other side and you see all of the issues that are taking place in the bladder because you're getting the backup when you have really large BPH or benign prostatic hyperplasia. Very important because that's going to help you understand what I see in my office as we start to diagnose these things. So as we talk about BPH, think about it as almost a two-pronged presentation when patients come to me. The most common one for me are the lower urinary tract symptoms. And they're big deals because not only do they impact everyone daily, but it also impacts your relationships sexually with your partner. And that's something that a lot of patients don't think about when they first come and see me. Now, that other arm out there, when we're talking about bladder outlet obstruction, that one usually doesn't necessarily come to my office. That's usually at the urologist's office and so forth because you actually have obstruction of the urethra in that picture that I had. That you'll see, usually you're going to treat that with surgery. Sometimes you get stones, renal failure, and that's when that bladder I showed you, that backs up into the kidneys. So once again, becomes a bigger issue. Now, these lower urinary tract symptoms, the things that I see that patients come in, so they'll come in and say, Doc, you know, when I'm urinating, I've realized that my stream isn't as strong as it used to be. They'll notice that there's a little bit of a hesitancy or that it's prolonged. one of the bigger ones, and this is especially, I came out here from New York, so this is football season. And so you'll see a lot of guys come in that say they'll use the bathroom, they'll go to watch the game and come back and sit down, and then they have to go again. And so the issue is they're not completely emptying, so that's a big issue. Now, when you think about some of those symptoms that are really irritating to them, obviously increased frequency of urination is something we don't want to deal with, but it's the nocturia. In other words, getting up all night, which once again wreaks havoc on a relationship each and every night. It's kind of hard to be romantic when someone's getting up 5 or 6 times a night. It kind of kills the mood. So it's something that really impacts patients. So how am I going to diagnose this? So a lot of it is a clinical diagnosis. The first thing, obviously, it starts with the medical history. And then we talked about, and Mark talked about this as well, as far as that score, the IPSS score. It's a scoring system. They ask you about 7 questions. It's from 0 to 5, and you can get a number to 35 if your symptoms are really severe. So you'll ask that sometimes. The other thing is the physical exam. Now, this is the one that makes the guys shudder. That's the rectal exam, right? You got to have that. The rectal exam gives a lot of information. It allows you to feel the size of the prostate. It allows you to feel like there's any nodules on the prostate, which takes me down a different kind of pathway of where we need to go. The other thing is you can also check the PSA sometimes, but we all know it's a little controversial right now as to what to do with that data, but it's still something that we should kind of do when you have somebody that's coming in with new symptoms. Now, how are we going to treat it? And this is where it becomes important for me because, look, I am Western trained, but I've learned that there are some other ideals and Eastern ideals that are a little bit closer to the earth to make a really big difference. So that first phase is that watchful waiting phase. And that's where saw palmetto is perfectly placed. Number one, we'll talk a little bit about why some of the other drugs are an issue, but it's perfect because, let me tell you, try to tell a patient who comes in, they're having the urinary frequency, they're having some sexual discomfort and issues now, that we're going to watch this for a while. Doesn't go over well. So we need to make sure that we're offering something, and that's where saw palmetto fits in nicely. The other thing now, we're going to talk about the pharmacotherapy behind it. So when a patient comes in that has BPH that's diagnosed, the first thing, we usually start alpha blockers, Flomax, something like that for some of you who are familiar with that. Then we have 5-alpha reductase inhibitors. One of the common ones is actually finasteride as well, and we'll talk about that. And the last one is Cialis, and that's new. And it's fascinating because we know that Cialis has some activity for BPH now, but I've already told you that it also affects the sexual relationship. So it's kind of a nice a catch-all if you need that or if that's something that's going on. So as we talk about what the drugs actually do, what they do, and you'll see here, let me see if I can make that move for you. I'm so impressed. That was very difficult to do, believe it or not. So you'll see that those circles are there because they're letting you know that they inhibit the formation of DHT. Remember, I mentioned that earlier to say that that's what we're thinking is the cause for that enlarged prostate. So when you're looking at what finasteride does, saw palmetto extract does something very similar, and that's why we get the benefits with that as well. So when we talk about the side effects, and this is the hard part for me because as I mentioned, look, I'm Western trained, but in a sense I've kind of seen the light and figured out there's some other ways to make a difference and impact patients. And so when I'm talking to them about something like saw palmetto, and then I have to talk to them about maybe finasteride, I need to talk to them about some of these things that are side effects of the finasteride and these class of drugs. So we're talking about impotence. That kind of goes backwards, right, for what I'm trying to do for patients each and every day. And then we have loss of interest in sex. Then we have abnormal ejaculation. We have dizziness, weakness, all of these things that are kind of man-made in a sense. And so obviously there's a role for something like this if you need to, but it's just a point to understand that there's a lot that goes into figuring out how to manage BPH optimally and have a happy patient at the end of the day who still has a good romantic relationship with their partner. And so some of the things that I talk about is solution for not only just maintaining a healthy prostate in general, but just everything that we do. So you want to be aware, I always will say, if you ever see me talking or doing anything, I'm going to always tell you that food is medicine. We're at a place that you hear it night and day, but it's true. So we know certain things are not good for our prostate. We know that we shouldn't have refined sugars, processed food. We know red meat probably isn't the best for our prostate either. We also know there are some good things for our prostate. Lycopene, get that out of tomatoes, nuts, healthy fats. So there are some things that we could do to kind of make a difference so that patients understand that you can take a little bit control by just making sure you think about what you're putting into your body. The other thing is to reduce the S word. I usually don't say that. Only because I'm here with you guys today, I'm going to say the word stress. But I put it out of my whole vocabulary. I always call it the S word because it impacts our health in so many different ways that we don't think about. But it truly does, because stress causes S word causes inflammation. And that's what we don't want, because inflammation causes disease. The other thing, get lots of sleep. So the CDC says we're supposed to get about 7.5 hours of sleep a day. And that's not obviously happening for a lot of us, but it's definitely not happening for patients who have BPH. They're going to the bathroom all night. And that's, once again, impacting that relationship terribly. The other thing is, obviously, we need to stay active. It's important to get those yummy endorphins in our body going so that we're happy, so that we're making sure that we're doing everything we can do to stay healthy. And last but not least, I always say, look, it's important to have a relationship with your physician, because your physician should really feel like a member of your family. You should feel like you should be able to pick up that phone and get a partner in this, because this is a really big deal for men. And when you're around 50 years of age, and I even have patients, some who are a little bit younger, that come with some of these symptoms, it becomes a really big deal. So I guess the big take home for me is, we hear BPH a lot, but I bet you a lot of you wouldn't expect to see it number 4 on that level behind heart disease and cholesterol and hypertension as something that's really affecting men. So I just wanted to make sure that I really brought that home to you. So thank you. Sure.
Okay. Can have all the water I want because I took Palmetto today. So. That's a very tough act to follow, because Dr. Red Cross told you you're going to go to the bathroom less and have a great sex life. So I don't know where we're going from there. But I'm here to talk to you about the consumer side of things. I'm with a company called IVC, International Vitamin Corporation. We sell an awful lot of Palmetto. And our main customer base, our main business would be mass market U.S. retail for some of the most respected retailers that you know. And so it's very important, the first aspect is quality, because we don't take any risks when it comes to quality. You just can't. So even more than some of the brands out there, the retailers really need to have everything in line. And so that's something I would like to hammer in. Whatever materials are out there, they need to have the ability at the raw material ingredient level to have the quality, at the manufacturing level to have that quality, and then also the ability for USP, which is becoming more important from a consumer perspective, to be able to have USP verification, which this material actually does. I always say, the people of Valencia are great people, but I always say for our retailers, IVC is there. We're not so much in the supplemental business. We wouldn't be in lycopene or beta-cytosterol, but we're in the business to help people with their prostates, prostate health, and to help them support that. So we're almost agnostic, but we've been in this ingredient for over a decade, well over a decade. It's, like I said, sell an awful lot of it. And what I found kind of brings me to the second point. So the first is the quality. The second is it has to work, okay? And there's a lot of things out there besides just the drugs, but some herbs that are for this indication. But I like to look at the practical side of things, and that's all sales, because we're not a nonprofit. Mark's from a nonprofit, but IVC certainly isn't. So we need to make sure this works for everybody. And you've probably seen some prostate health products advertised on TV, and we believe a lot of these things can work. But with that type of advertising and push, we just never know, because the consumers churn in and out so much. What I'm here to tell you is, for over a decade, we've been using Palmetto, the right berries, the ones that have a good active to them. And we see our sales steady and slowly increasing, and we don't do any advertising. We provide for the retailers. So we're basically making a quality product and putting it on the shelf. A consumer may try it, but if anyone out there is in sales, okay, you know that the first sale is very exciting. But that's not the most important sale. Your most important sale is the second sale, because you know that you have a loyal consumer, they're going to keep coming back, and it's working for them. And that's what we've seen at IVC for all of the retailers we have this product with. So quality is one, and the second, it has to work, otherwise your customers are going to come back. So Mark and Uma had talked about different options out there, and throughout the entire course of time that we've been offering products, we always go with the right berries. There are lower cost ingredients out there, and for IVC, our model is store brand. So you would think, you know, our margins are pretty slim. We don't have brand margins, but we always still opt to only do the ingredient that, number one, has the quality and is effective, because it's just too much risk for us and our retailers to play around with powders or different extracts that don't have the active that this is. So this is we believe it's pretty special. We're really behind Valence's activity to prevent green berries from being consumed, and you know, wait a little longer and get the benefit of the ripe berries, because the green ones are more fragile. So that's what I would tell you. And you know, I know we're going to have a panel and forum. So thanks.
Thank you, Steve, and Ken, and Mark, and Uma. So informative, and you're all here representing the best of what there is to offer in terms of information, education, rightful practice, appropriate recommendations to consumers, appropriate products to consumers. That said, there are these wide windows, generally economically motivated, for problems throughout the value chain and the supply chain, and I'm going to just pose this openly to all of you on the panel. I'd just like to hear from you each, from your perspectives, about how do we raise the awareness bar to those respective parties within the value chain. We've got consumers first, they're the king, but they don't necessarily know what's behind the products, although they may be asking for that. They don't understand that necessarily. So the brand holders are those filters, but we know that there's a lot of economic motivation for perhaps doing things incorrectly, or sometimes there's just ignorance. Then there are problems within the supply chain, and then there are also differentials in terms of extraction processes, even with those that are doing things on the up and up with the raw material. So I'd just like to hear from you each about how we raise this awareness bar, specifically about saw palmetto, and help consumers and the other parties make the right choices to make the right products available.
Well, I'll tell you, am I still okay, guys? Yeah. You know, it's a little bit of challenge from the patient side of things, right? I mean, I think the important thing is that we have to continue to educate slowly. You have to understand, it's the extract, not the powder. You know, it's junk. And so it takes time. It takes time for that. So I can jump up and down as one doc in New York City, but how do I get it to the others? And so I may do it through different media channels, different ways to help educate everyone out there that, you know, where all of us are here knowing these things, but how can we drive it down to patients? And so that's the important thing to me, because I see the outcomes. I love being able to see patients get to health and to get to healing without a prescription pad. That's the best thing. And so to be able to offer something like that, thank God that things have changed, that patients are looking for that. So I have a little bit more of a captive audience than maybe I did when I started my training 20 years ago.
Do you recommend specific products to your patients, or do you tell them what to look for and what to ask for, whether they're buying online or buying from a brick and mortar retailer?
You know, I usually do things like I share PubMed with them so they can also be, you know, better educated with that. I also, once again, go by the things that I've learned and understood, and even learned from these guys and about the harvesting. You know, it's funny, I was doing a book signing last week, and this was totally just about the importance of the patient-doctor relationship. That's my thing. And he comes up and he says, you know, and I didn't even tell you guys this. He says, have you heard about these berries in Florida that they're pirating, he used? And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be talking about that. So, you know, consumers are getting it somehow, in some way, because they want it. And so I think that's the good thing. We have a much more captive audience. But look, it's going to be a little bit more of a marathon than a sprint, but I know we can get there.
But it also sounds like there's problematic raw material coming into this country for manufacturing. So inevitably there'll be some problematic products in the marketplace. What do you say about that, Mark? I mean, how do we tackle that issue?
Well, this has been one of the biggest problems, probably the biggest problem in the entire herbal industry for many years. The question of quality, especially with respect to adulterated, counterfeit, and fraudulent raw materials and extracts coming into the market mimicking materials. Our approach at ABC has been to meet it head on. We got some pushback from some of our friends in industry because they were concerned by taking on the adulterants program and starting this whole idea that we would create some negative publicity in the marketplace and basically actually give more fodder to those who would be critical of the industry and its activities. We believe that it's important just to call it what it is, adulteration, and do the best we can to educate industry first, because many people in the industry didn't even realize that this type of adulteration was even going on, and or the extent of it was going on, and or how it was being done. So the way we took it on is through the Botanical Adulterants Prevention Program. The idea is to help prevent adulteration, is to educate companies that are buying raw materials and extracts from suppliers to double, triple down on the herbs that we are continually confirming are being adulterated based on either initially rumor, innuendo, suspicion, and or allegations, and actually look at the literature and see what's available, look at unpublished laboratory data and published laboratory data, and publish these bulletins confirming that things are adulterated. And one of the things about our bulletins that's unique is that we show the economic information, not just the chemical and other information that confirms adulteration. We show that the real material costs a range of X to Y, and the known adulterant is X, much cheaper by a factor of 4, 5, 8 times cheaper, lower cost, so that you have to show that there is a basis for economic motivation to adulterate in the first place. Otherwise, you don't have a case. You have maybe some good lab information, but it may not be compelling. All of our botanical adulterants bulletins show that information, that there is economic motivation. And the problem is, it's hard to get out. This is such a large industry. It's such a fractionated and layered and textured industry. It's not monolithic. It's not homogeneous. It's hard to reach all the manufacturers with the message that they have to double or triple down in their quality control efforts to ensure that they're not buying adulterated material from their suppliers. And sometimes there's many different types of suppliers. Some are simply brokers or distributors who don't retest or sometimes even take possession of the material itself that they sell to other people. And so they have no idea what they're selling sometimes. Unfortunately, I hate to say it. So that's why we're also doing these laboratory guidance documents, which actually show which laboratory methods actually do work, which are fit for purpose to actually detect the type of adulteration that's been going on, because some of the older methods may have worked when they were published in the 1980s or even 20 years ago, 1990s, but based on the way that some of the adulteration is happening, which is obviously intentional, there's no accident to some of this stuff, it's consistently weird. Only the most recent techniques sometimes are able to detect that type of adulteration. One of the problems is that there's people out there who just don't give a damn. They are possibly some of the people here in this convention. I don't know who they are. But there are people out there who continually sell fraudulent material. It's fraud. There's no other way. You can call it adulterated, you can call it counterfeit, but it's fraud because it's intentionally adulterated. It's not an accidental issue. And the real game for us, the real motivation for us, is to get to the purchasers, the buyers, to ensure that they are using proper analytical technology in order to detect this adulteration in the first place and stop it. And then I'll be talking later in the next half hour about our new SOP, our standard operating procedure proposal, to actually a best practices proposal to have companies who receive material that they have determined is adulterated in some way that is what we call irreparably defective, to not do what is the typical practice in this industry, which is to return it to supplier for credit But instead, if you've got possession of something that's irreparably defective, don't return it, but take the moral position, and using our SOP, which I'll talk about later, basically have it disposed of or incinerated. In other words, burn it, don't return it. And that way we're taking some of this adulterated junk out of the marketplace, doing what the government could be doing, should be doing, but can't because they can't keep up with what's going on. It doesn't have the manpower at FDA and the resources. And this industry, the responsible elements of this industry could and should self-regulate this problem. The one ironic thing is that most of the better quality companies, most of the responsible companies will probably in most cases never get some of this junk that they have to burn or return because they've done such a good job qualifying their supplier in the first place that they won't receive this kind of stuff because that's not they're not in that part of the market.
So ultimately, there's a buyer. A buyer will be aware on the branded side, but on the consumer side, it's buyer beware too. And I suppose they need to purchase from trusted brands. And I'm just wondering, this is for you, Uma. Then, is there anything that Valensa's doing directly with its customers to help them educate their customers? To help. I mean, I hate to be so granular. Is there room for a seal, for some kind of certification? I mean, we don't want certifications for every single raw material that's botanically based or that's naturally sourced. I mean, that starts to become, it's overly onerous. But I struggle with, how do we ensure that this kind of standard process for quality gets driven all the way through the value chain to be able to provide beneficial, authentic products ultimately to consumer.
Absolutely. I think with what I agree with Mark, our industry is highly self-regulated, right? And what Valensa is doing is to actually educate across the value chain. It starts with the reason we call our program GEMS is we go to the landowners and the harvesting companies and say, look, these berries are like gems. These are Florida gems. They are valuable. Don't allow practices that will actually ruin the future of this. It's of economic interest for the state. It's an economic interest for the people who own the land. If you're letting the berries to be picked prematurely, sold as a scam product, it's going to hit everybody. Okay, so I think we're doing education from the grassroots levels, landowners. That's why we work in the University of Florida. It's not Valensa telling them. It's a university with research background going and telling the farmers, look, this is a cash crop. This is how you manage it. This is how you harvest them, and this is how you can make commercial interest for you. So education at that level and education at the level from a customer perspective. We definitely, one of the reasons we started the GEMS program, it's not easy because we have to fund a lot of studies, and it is, and as Steve said, Palmetto, for a company like us who is doing the right thing, is not a big margin business. So still we have to do the right thing. So that means we invest in education of our customers. We work with them to make sure that we, how do we, identify a fake Palmetto? How do we test Palmetto? That's why we work with the USP. The USP is a monograph. There are labs that can actually test as per the fatty acid ratios. It could be published. And also, there is a lot of education done from the consumer level. As Dr. Redcross said, the consumer they have health in their hands. They have access to information in their hands. They are not, you can feed them with information which are fake and which is false, but they will figure it out. They'll try the product. It doesn't work. They'll switch the brand. But so the education at that level comes from evidence building. So doing clinical research, publishing those in reputable journals, and getting them to read these information. Say, okay, if I need to help my prostate, I need to take an 85 to 90% total fatty acid extract that's got a certain dosage, twice daily or once daily. And this is the regimen that I go take for 90 days before the product works. There's no magic bullet here. It's an age-old problem, and same thing with our supply chain. It's an age-old problem, and we have to fix it. and we are taking steps to fix it. I'm sure there are responsible companies like us who are doing the same, but I think education, but also walking the talk is extremely important for us.
And are there, what about supply chain challenges? I mean, when we're dealing with an authentic product like this and it's subject to weather challenges, and pricing is always a factor. It's always a factor, even if you're on lean margins, the consumer is always, unfortunately, I suppose, driven by price, so that opens that up. So is the supply chain sustainable?
So that is the goal of the GEMS program. It's definitely to make the supply chain sustainable. Sustainability, as I said, it's not about just the harvest, but also ensuring that there is price stability, there's supply consistency. I think Steve put this